They're eating the cats and dogs. They're poisoning the blood of our country. They are not people, in my opinion. They are animals. They are vermin. My kids are reading through the Harry Potter series right now. I remember reading through those books and thinking about all the mistakes made along the way and wondering how it was possible for Voldemort, sorry guys, and his followers to gain so much ground so quickly. It used to strike me as an impossibility and the kind of stretch where you make for a work of fiction. Then I watched it happen here, in the real world, to our own country. I'm still trying to get my head around how ready people are to declare other people as being unworthy of love, unworthy of respect, unworthy of rights, and in the most extreme cases, unworthy of life, simply because they're not like us. It's pretty hard to actually hurt another human being. Most of us aren't built to do it easily. Despite all that we see around us, we're altruistic by nature, most of the time. It's difficult to take something away from someone who's a lot like you, especially if that thing you're taking is life, liberty, or justice. People tend to object when they see other people suffering. So if you're trying to generate hate, what's the solution? Turn your targets into something else. Make them inhuman. Make them less than human. The ultimate goal of dehumanization is to erase the moral barrier against harming another human being. Usually, so you can make a grab for power on the wings of fear and hatred of those who aren't like us. We're not hurting people. We're defeating the enemy. We're beating the animals. We're stepping on the rungs of the ladder to success. Your suffering is because of them. They're taking your jobs. Get rid of them and we'll be able to make things better. ICE, Kristallnacht, Gaza. I've come to believe that one of the greatest dangers we face isn't simply cruelty. It's forgetting, or worse, actively denying each other's humanity. History shows us that atrocities begin with turning people into something less than people, enemies, vermin, criminals, resources, problems to be managed. But we don't have to commit atrocities to fall into that habit. We do it whenever we reduce someone to a label instead of a neighbor, a performance metric instead of a person, or a stereotype instead of a story. The mechanisms that enable history's greatest atrocities are not entirely different from the ones that appear in our everyday lives. They're vastly different in scale and consequence, but they begin with the same temptation: to stop seeing another person as fully human. The consequences aren't as dramatic on the grand scale, but they're built with the same tools. Every time we choose curiosity over assumption, every time we ask, what might I not know about this person? We're resisting that impulse. We're putting down the tools of hatred and spite. We're insisting that the person in front of us, before anything else, is human, just like us. I once sought to be a high school teacher. In fact, there are a couple hundred people out there in their 40s who I have to hope look back on our time together in band, choir, or English with some fondness, and if I was having a particularly good day, they might have made some good use of one or two of my lessons, either about scholastic matters or social concerns. Teaching can be a marvelous thing, and no matter how good or bad I was at it, I don't regret any of the time I spent in front of a classroom. This is not to say that there weren't challenges, or that I didn't mess things up from time to time. I could tell tales of the battles between myself and students or against politics for hours, but there are a few that stand out to this day and which have helped shape who I am and what I have come to believe. There's a common tale in most teaching circles that the actual education degree doesn't so much prepare you to teach as it does allow you to dip your toes in with some foresight and with a chance of survival. I can attest that in the first 2 minutes of my teaching life, I decided that the vast majority of what I had been taught was to be discarded. In, in the face of the reality of actually being a teacher, when the first quarter zips by your head and slams into the whiteboard at 100 miles an hour, Maslow's hierarchy of needs becomes more of a personal thing. In those years of being a public school teacher, I learned what exhaustion was. I learned to have a thick skin and to be tough. I learned to rule with an iron fist of utter fairness. That's what happens in survival mode. The rules were clear and laid out on the wall in literal black and white, and aligned clearly with the school-wide prescribed consequences. I needed easy solutions to my problems, and I got comfortable with looking at the chart and doling out the prescribed punishment without any need for gray areas. I'm lucky enough to have stayed in teaching long enough to grow and recover from that blindness. Sometime during my second year, I realized that I had developed strategies and knowledge and skills which were allowing me to be effective and not just defend myself. By my third year of teaching, some of my own education began to creep back into the classroom, but only the parts that I had carefully filtered through experience. Lessons like, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And there's more going on in anybody's life than you can possibly know, and it affects every single thing that they say and do. And you're allowed to be human. In fact, it's highly recommended. Lessons mean more when they relate to what the students are actually going through. These should ideally never have left my mind at all, but I had to go through enough to learn where they fit and how to actually use that wisdom effectively. There were many good times where I was able to reach into the heads and hearts of my students and make a connection and really impart knowledge, and with any luck, not do too much damage on my worst days. There were still times that tried me and which caused me to doubt my profession and whether there was any hope for society's future. You too. One day in particular comes to mind when a student in my classroom, one of those students who's really only interested in putting on a show to the detriment of the education of those around them, and got particularly aggressive and had to be sent to the office. I wrote up the appropriate form and sent him on his way. The office sent him back. This happened again, and eventually I was forced to walk him down to the office myself and demand that he stay there. Authority exists because of the consent of the governed, and I hadn't been teaching long enough to deal with a challenge to my authority from those who were supposed to be supporting me, in this case, the assistant principal. After that, I wrote a note to the assistant principal letting him know that I felt like I had not been supported and that, quite frankly, it hurt. Honestly, it was a really mild note, I promise. But this led to a meeting with the principal and the assistant principal, which turned suddenly into a performance review. I was somehow clear-headed enough to require that if the meeting was to go this way, I needed to have the building's union representative present for the conversation. I could see in their faces from my supervisors, this was not how it was supposed to go in their minds. I taught at the same school for 2 more years after that, and we had some really good days, but I have never, and will never forget the experience where my pain and embarrassment were turned against me and used as weapons. Despite this, I never meant to leave teaching, but recessions and the budgets of public school districts don't often consult with the wants of individual teachers before they strike. I found myself working at Starbucks while pursuing a master's degree in education. I figured that some time as a barista would do me good, and it came with health insurance. If you've never worked food service, you've missed a really profound window into how people work. When compared to teaching, it was a job of sheer simplicity, at least as far as the assigned tasks went. The real value was in learning to interact more with colleagues and customers on a personal level for hours every day. As an introvert, I found it exhausting on a whole different level. I also learned some very important things about corporate politics and what it means again to trust people who ultimately weren't there to support me. I was starting to see a trend, and I caught myself leaning to the cynical perspective of, we're all just out for number one and we can't really rely on anybody. When I graduated with my master's degree and the economy was in shambles, I took shelter at DeVry University online as an academic advisor. Not a job I would recommend to anybody who is faint of heart, thin of skin, or compassionate to the fate of others. The trenches of for-profit education are full of strife and toil. During that time, life really hit. I got married. I bought a house. I had kids and started working on another master's degree in public administration. I found myself engaged in team leadership and training, and while I don't relish many of the memories of that time, I can say they were absolutely formative to my approach to management. Over the next 9 years, I experienced some of the best friends and most significant betrayals of my life, early life anyway, and I was getting pretty tired by the end. You see, up until that time, I had the endurance of youth and the notion that I could simply be a good worker without ambition or schemes of my own. And quite frankly, everybody else should do the same thing. My life and my approach to it was shallow and nearsighted. Coming home to a wife and daughters forcibly expanded my perspective regarding the impact of one's personal life on one's professional life. Two things I'd always been successful at keeping well and truly separate to that point. Strangely, it seemed like a lot of my colleagues were having similar struggles all of a sudden. I believe that the analogy of having the blindfold ripped off would be appropriate at this point in time. People lived, died, and fought all around me and brought personal lives to work in a way that I had always ignored as irrelevant. Nearly a decade of that culminated in another round of layoffs, but at this time I relished the experience and felt like I'd been freed. In what now strikes me as something of a pattern, this is also about the time I was finishing up my master's degree in public administration. Within a couple of weeks, I found myself with my current company through the machinations of my extended family. I was finally hired to do teaching again, sort of. I was hired to be a software trainer for a company whose products support clinical trials. This I could do. This was a job that would use my skills and talents and which I could step away from at the end of the day. At least that was the case until we got busy. After I delivered 100 trainings in a single quarter, I suggested that we should probably hire another trainer. It didn't dawn on me that this would shove me into a management role, but I found myself with a direct report before too long. With my workload divided up between two of us, my life once again seemed manageable. And then my boss called. There was a team of technical writers, something about which I knew absolutely nothing. My boss was completely overwhelmed, and the quality of our technical writing was absolutely insufficient for our industry's requirements. He asked if I would take a stab at managing the team, which had seen horrendous levels of turnover. All we had left at that point was one contractor and one full-time writer. Many sleepless nights and 5 years later, the training team has increased to 5 people, and the technical writing team is up to 7 people. It dawned on me while I was writing up one of a dozen annual reviews that my boss had sneakily turned me into a manager. I was so annoyed. And then people started noticing something. My turnover was nearly 0. And this with half my team in India, where as I've been told that job hopping is basically just how life works. My US and European teams were also staying put. The upshot of all this was that we trained people up, honed their skills, and they stayed, got better, and grew in talents and efficiency. You'd be amazed what a good technical writing team can do to advance the quality of your software when they know what they're about. So if you know. This is all a really good way, a very long way of coming back to the point. I've learned a lot about managing people, developing people, and keeping people. Therein lies the secret. Did you catch it? I manage people. I help develop people. I've been the recipient of some truly awful management, and I've developed a very cynical view explaining why HR exists. Sorry, guys. But to keep the company safe from the repercussions as it mines and uses up the human resources that it feeds to the machines of business. As soon as I started being responsible for people at my current job, I vowed to see them as people first. After all, we have to be human before we can be anything else. Don't let corporate policy tell you otherwise. What does that mean? That means our one-to-one meetings touch on work, but focus on our experience, both at home and in the office. If you're going through a hard time, I want to know about it. And my first question will be, how can I help? Or what can we do to support you through this? Don't get me wrong, I'm not one of those welcome to the family sorts who thinks that we should all hang out together and all the time we're supposed to be close. No, the focus here is that I want you to know that I care about you as a person and that I acknowledge that life doesn't just step aside when we walked in the door to work. You're allowed to be human. In fact, it's encouraged. On a different but related note, when my kids do something odd or that I would say is wrong, I step back to make sure that they should have reasonably known that, for example, putting whipped cream on meatballs would be weird. I also have to take a second look at myself and wonder if I'm imposing my perspective onto theirs and if that's what I want to do. I.e., just so you guys know, sure, go ahead and try that. If you're thinking that it'll be good, it's not going to hurt you. It's just not something that I would do. For the record, they say that the experiment was a success and it was uncommonly tasty as a combination for those who might be brave enough to try it. No thanks. My ultimate message here is for anybody who ever comes into contact with another human being. Regardless of what you see or hear or smell or sense in any other regard about a person, there's more going on. There is a significant value to taking a step back from your interpretation or preconceived notions or your own lens so that you can peer around at the human being in front of you. Take a moment to try to abandon your own perspective and adopt theirs. Realize that they usually want the same things as you, and that they're motivated by and afraid of many of the same things that you are. And that when it comes down to it, they, just like you, need to be human before they can be anything else. Put down the tools of those who would make you see them as a number, or as a threat, or as a thief. Pick up the tools of thinking rationally and critically before leaping to judgment. It's really easy to quote a line or tell a joke. It's harder to wonder what they do to the people around you. Whether you're a manager, a barista, a teacher, a sales rep, or just someone who breathes the same air as the rest of us, don't let anybody take away your humanity, and don't help anybody else strip the humanity from another human being. Thank you.
Visit us at UUSG.org.